Hi, my name is Diana Lang, and during the following presentation, Ada Villatoro and I will be discussing the Immigration Reform and Control Act. The Immigration Reform and Control Act is known as the IRCA. The intent of the Immigration Reform and Control Act was to revise, rectify, and renovate all of the statuses of unauthorized immigrants in the United States. This comprehensive immigration reform was outlined by the Reagan administration and was enacted by the 99th Congress in 1986. Immigration reform increasingly became the focus of Congress starting in the late 1970s. In April 1983, Congress estimated that 2 million immigrants lived and worked in the United States without authorization. By the mid-1980s, that number had as much as doubled, with an estimated 3 to 5 million immigrants living and working in the United States without authorization. There was controversy in both chambers regarding the Immigration Reform and Control Act, and although there was some support, it was not strongly backed by Democratic lawmakers generally. The Hispanic caucus feared it unnecessarily alienated Hispanic citizens and would lead employers to avoid hiring Hispanic workers altogether in order to avoid entanglement with burdensome regulation. Also, labor unions generally did not support the IRCA legislation. The IRCA contained three primary provisions that defined the legislation and defined its attempt to reform America's immigration laws. These were tougher border security and enforcement, penalties for employers who hired unauthorized immigrants, and legalization for unauthorized immigrants who had been in the U.S. for 5 years or more. Supporters of the bill saw each of the three elements as essential to providing the desired immigration change. The first of the three key provisions provided for tightening border security through several means. Key among these were increased funding for the Border Patrol, leveraging emerging communications technology, and tighter enforcement. Of all the provisions, this was probably the least poorly executed, with money not arriving to beef up the Border Patrol until 1990. Congress believed that rapid development in telecommunication systems, radar, and other electronic measures could be utilized to direct border enforcement agents efficiently and effectively along the border. Employer penalties were intended to address the economic motivation for illegal immigration raised by the Senate Judiciary Committee. The act instituted the I-9 program, which required employers to verify prospective employee eligibility for work. Employers could do this either by verifying the existence of certain identification documents, such as a passport or a certification of United States citizenship, or by examining both an employment eligibility document and a personal identification document. Failure to comply with the I-9 requirements of the Act could result in a penalty for the employer of no less than $100 and no more than $1,000 per individual incident. In other words, failing to comply with the Act when hiring 10 employees could result in a civil fine as low as $1,000 or as high as $10,000. The law has additionally undergone many changes since its passage. In 1996, Congress created a good faith defense to the employer verification procedures. This provision allowed employers who had not technically complied with the requirements of IRCA, but who could demonstrate a good faith effort to do so, could escape from liability under the law. Many commentators see this weakening, as well as other business-friendly loopholes, as fundamentally undermining any long-term efficacy the bill might have had in reducing the number of illegal immigrants coming to the United States. The last of its key provisions provided protections for individuals who could prove that they lived in the United States before January 1, 1982, or had proof of signing up with a selective service. Immigrants that met either of those requirements became eligible for temporary legal status after paying a $185 fee and demonstrating good moral character. Following an 18-month waiting period, the individual then became eligible to receive a green card, provided they had learned to speak English. However, all other immigrants not otherwise authorized to live, work, or study in the United States were subject to deportation under the IRCA. The IRCA has had unintended results, including more than 2 million individuals sought and obtained citizenship under IRCA. IRCA beneficiaries earned more over the course of their lives than later immigrants, and the IRCA helped influence a demographics change that enlivened Latino politics. Intended results of the IRCA include that the IRCA sought to lower or stop illegal immigration into the United States by cutting the financial incentive to hire unauthorized laborers. However, illegal immigration continued to rise, and more recent estimates suggest that as many as 11 million immigrants currently live and work in the United States without authorization. There are a few key reasons that the Act did not quite achieve its goals. By the time the bill was enacted, most of the employer penalties had been watered down and rendered largely ineffective. The good faith defense allowed a business to escape liability under the law where they could demonstrate they had in good faith attempted to comply with it. Also, many of the businesses hiring illegal immigrants already used shell contractors to shield the majority of their assets from civil liabilities, meaning that civil fines were mostly meaningless. Congress underestimated the demand that existed for unauthorized labor and failed to adequately blunt that demand. Although the IRCA was not toothy enough to effectively curtail large agricultural industries reliant on immigrant labor, the liability for many business owners remains meaningful. The failure to comply with the IRCA legislation can create back-end problems for employers and complicate a wide array of other situations, including status as an illegal immigrant cannot be used to prevent collective bargaining efforts under the NLRA, and employers are still liable for workplace violations under the FLSA. While IRCA shifted the burden of demonstrating eligibility from the employee to the employer, its ultimate failure at providing other adequate deterrents for violation or incentive to comply prevented the IRCA from achieving its intended result. Thank you for taking the time to view our presentation.